Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to whoever it is that might be listening. My name is Orbit, and today I'm here to tell you a story. I invite you to join me in a journey of my story, Ashes. Please sit tight and enjoy. The screams of pain echoed through the forest as the boy was lowered into the bubbling lava. He twitched violently, screaming in rage and fear and pain unprecedented. His eyes begged his father one last time to pull him back, to end the misery. His tears turned into mist as they contacted the lava, and the volcano swallowed his agonized body into its fiery embrace. Smoke flew and heat rose, and the mountain roared with satisfaction. As the village watched on, his skin and bones melted into the fire, pools of white over boiling red and orange. Young girls and grown men looked on the same, watching the ritual. The priest, standing at the rocky tip above the fire, raised his hands in the air and cried out to Esh, to his true god, begging. Only death can pay for life, he knew. What this death would earn him, he did not know. He knew it would not be worth the suffering, however. The village people have been stressing this sacrifice for months. They urged the young priest to give his firstborn to the gods, knowing how much it would satisfy them to feast upon holy ashes. At first, the priest disagreed violently, not willing to forfeit his own blood. Yet they forced him, with threats and violence and loss of interest in his sermons. He had no other way. As he watched the last remnants of his son burn away in the flame, he fell to his knees. His hair scorched by the fire and eyes blind by the thick smoke, he coughed violently, splattering phlegm into the lava. His long robes flew about him as a powerful breeze caught him by the chest and flung his hair back, washing his misty tears and pushing the smoke away. He could see a clear night sky above. The stars shone brightly against the bright fire, almost winking at the priest. He tried to smile back, but his body only managed a tired sob. Embers flying about him, he stood up and turned to his people. "O people," he said to them, "hear my voice now." All around him the stirs and whispers died down. Silence fell upon the village folk, who stood at the edge of the great forest, their eyes shrouded with respect and doubt. He sensed men fingering their spears, boys jittering about behind their mothers' skirts. His body shaking slightly with inconsistent sobs, he continued, "I have given my son to Esh, the god of fire and life." He saw some men nod, and with his chest now puffed out, he continued. "Skaz is now playing in the halls of fire and ash up above. His heart one with that of the all-powerful Esh. His soul will forever be a part of those halls, laughing and rejoicing for all eternity." Screams, pain, fire. The priest cleared his throat and raised his arms. "All life has a price, and only death can pay for life. What life this sacrifice will bring us, I fear I do not know." At that, some women looked at their husbands in doubt. The men looked on at the priest, their eyes unwavering. "My son lived a full life for a young boy. He was happy, and so he will remain. But eternal happiness has a price, and those that seek it must be given to the all-magnificent Esh by the fire. May his life pay for years of good fortune to come." The priest looked skyward, expecting the villagers to repeat him. Instead, he was greeted with cold, fearful silence. He looked at their faces. Their eyes were all fixated behind him, at a spot within the ocean of liquid flame that apparently was more interesting than his emotional service. He cried out again, "May his life pay for years of good fortune to come!" The terrified villagers didn't respond. The priest saw the men reaching for their spears, women tightly grasping their babes at their breasts. His jaw locked and his pupils shrunk at the crowd. "Answer me!" he roared at them, tears streaming down his shaven cheeks. His grey, tattered hair fell about his brow like the ash on the ground, engulfing his light green eyes, falling over his sharp ears. He looked at his people, but all he could see were the flames, and his son wallowing in horrible pain. Death, smoke, ashes. After staring at the flames' shadows flicker at his people for some seconds, the man, exasperated, finally turned around to see what was so important that they had to interrupt a religious ceremony with their empty expressions and their horrified eyes. As he turned around, he searched the lava for what they were looking at. It wasn't very hard to find. A bubble was rising within the flames, a bubble of liquid lava, white hot and dripping with fire. It rose, higher and higher it rose, a fist of gold punching at the night sky from the volcano's rivers. The bubble was growing faster with every passing second, looming over the swirling lava like a child over a dog pup. It hissed and clicked and moved, fire swirling within it. The priest froze atop his ledge, almost losing his balance and succumbing too to the flames. He carefully regained his stance and turned back to the people, his eyes dancing about crazily. They say priests can see the future, he thought as he scanned the crowd. Is that true, or am I just particularly good at creating problems for myself? His hands shaking and voice breaking, he let the shadows dance over his followers as he recollected his thoughts, enough to croak out one word. Run! To that, fortunately, they listened. The command was all they needed to hear. Men and children alike sprinted into the shrubbery under the smile of the stars. The bushes and trees rustled as human bodies burst through them, some screaming, some crying, some booming commands. The priest hopped off the ledge above the lava, jumped off a second, lower rock, and landed on the soft, blackened earth, made so by years of ashes and a very hot tide. The heat burning at his back, he threw off his robe and tall cap, flung them both on the charcoal-black ground. With only a loincloth about him, he ran, picking up a dropped spear as he went. Not that it'll help. The forest was teeming with life when he entered it at the fastest sprint he could manage. Birds screeching, monkeys laughing in the shadows. In spite of the bubble behind him, the man managed a hoarse chuckle as sweat dripped down his brow. You won't be laughing soon, poor creatures. With the spear to clear his way, he followed the human yells and ran, jumping over rocks, shrubs, bushes, and anything that stood in his way. After some short time, the forest sounds died down. From behind him, he heard a very loud hiss and a thud, and then more hisses. Soon enough, the monkeys and birds and snakes were all coming with him, escaping. Escaping from what, exactly? His brain went blank, and for a second he stared at the full moon, its dim light ricocheting through the trees. He stood there, wondering. Fire, lava, death, came the answer. Oh, that's it. And with that thought, he kept running. His chaser was faster, however. He smelled the smoke from behind him before he saw it, clouds of blackness brought about by the burning of forestry and life. The figure behind him was not going to slow down. As the man stopped to catch his breath, he felt a very hot push of air behind him. Turning around slowly, he found himself face to face with his pursuer, his own son. The figure towered over the priest, steam rising from its humanoid body. As he scanned him over, the priest found it difficult to recognize the child in his son anymore. Standing at almost 7 feet tall, muscles flexing at the moonlight, the boy, who was now a man, stood in front of his father, naked. His hair burned away and his body scorched to a charred color. He seemed an alien, towering over his father like some dark demon. Fire flowed through his veins, which shone passionately at the darkness and the shadows around them. His eyes were what gave him away, though. Such innocent eyes they used to be. Blue and bright and quick to laugh. Now they were still the same blue, yes, yet the laughter and youth were replaced by cold, icy stares, by death and blue fire and sharpness. He stared down at his father, man to man, with a fire burning through his veins and ice breaking in his eyes. His father stared back at him, his glare unwavering. He felt miserably tiny compared to his own child, yet he showed no emotion. He only set his jaw and faced his end with determination and fire of his own. The son made no move at his father, however. Instead, he sat down on the earth, his body hissing as he made contact with it. He looked up at his father, his palms propping him up behind him. "Why?" he croaked out. Embers burst from his mouth as he spoke, and his tongue and lips clicked and hissed. "Why?" The priest leaned on a nearby tree and sat down as well, his back propped up on the trunk. He cleared his throat and pondered an answer. He found only one. "You know why, son?" he whispered. The fiery creature sitting in front of him nodded, his glare now at the earth. He traced his finger aimlessly in the dirt, leaving patterns of burned soil in his wake. Finally, he looked up. "I hope you know what must happen now, father," he croaked, his jaw snapping liquid fire as he talked. His eyes, so cold and threatening before, were now only sad and tired. Emptily, father looked at son and nodded calmly, his head swinging up and down like a pendulum. He knew what must be done now, although it did not make sense. His empty smile returned, a smile of the ones kissed by death and fire. He was ready to make his own sacrifice. Like father, like son, they would always say. But don't they also say only death can pay for life? How does death pay for death? His son stood up and walked over to the tree. At his touch, the wood cracked and blackened, shriveling up until only cinders remained. "Your time has come," said his son, his own blood. As the tall figure swept in for the kill, the priest thought of fire and lava. He thought of pain, of suffering, of a village full of folk who needed direction. He thought of the fiery halls and what they must be like, thought of death and life and what they mean. But most of all, he thought of a face full of agony, pain, disbelief. He saw betrayal in those light blue eyes, and he saw shock that was so sharp it hurt to visualize. He remembered his son and who he used to be, the boy who'd run about laughing and swinging a wooden spear. The life he made will be balanced by his death, and who better to carry it out than my own son? The priest awaited the final blow. But the blow never came. His son's fist was a hairline away from his face, vibrating, heat rising off of it. He heard a small sob and then a throat-clearing sound. He looked up and saw golden tears flowing from his son's icy eyes, lava, fire, and ice, all mixed into one expression. His son took a deep breath and mumbled to himself, "I knew I couldn't. He shouldn't have let me. Such a coward." Finally, the lava humanoid turned around and left his father under the sight of the stars. The priest breathed in deeply, his body shaking. As his son walked away, he began sobbing violently, salty tears streaming down his cheeks. His face smeared with ashes, he looked up at the skies and searched for the fiery halls, for Esh, for a sign from the god that death will give life. All he found were stars and blackness. Then, with a roar, his son came charging back, his fist of fire landing cleanly through the priest's skull. It snapped and cracked and hissed, and brains came oozing out, only to be burned immediately by the repeating punches of lava. The fire creature was wailing, cries of anguish and regret and forfeit. His fist buried itself into his father's head again and again, until only a burnt stump of a neck remained to the lifeless figure. And even then, the figure continued kicking and punching and screaming, its roars echoing through the forest, lava dripping from its body. When it was done, and all that was left of his father was a pile of bloody ashes, he turned around and ran into the bushes, burning all in his wake. The ashes he left of his father sat beneath the tree stump, occasionally licked by a soft breeze, as shadows danced and fire kissed up at the night's starry skies. The end. Thank you so much for joining me. and listening in. I truly hope that you have enjoyed my story and that it has made your day just a little bit happier. A collection of my short stories can be found on Amazon in a paperback copy containing every single story, beginning to end. I have linked said Amazon page in the description. Have a phenomenal day, and thank you.